All right, so this is a video for Thursday, the 28th, 28th, yeah, 27th of January. What I want to go through today is this is going to be a little bit tougher. Is looking at the custom window types that we use in Storrs Hall. First, I just wanted to reinforce what I was looking at the end of the last video for Tuesday, looking at the crit rooms here. There's a new wall type, 6A, which shouldn't be a problem for you to model. If you look at the construction documents, 6A is just two widths of CMU for a total width of 1 3 5/8. So if I go back to my wall types and hit edit type of this basic type 2, I'm going to duplicate it again, call this one type 6A, and call it 2 8-inch CMU, and hit OK. And then I'll go into the structure here and basically just want to take and insert another CMU of the same width. I'm going to find CMU, say OK. Just going to copy that width. You can see the entire thickness now is 1 3 1/4 inches. Here it's 1 3 5/8. It's because there is this little gap for some mortar, for a mortar joint between the two. So we need to add in a 3/8 inch gap to that wall thickness. So back in here, going to insert once more, and this one will just be an air layer. And I'm just going to select air just to get the line work to work out for that gap. The thickness is 3/8 of an inch. Now we've got our total 1 foot 3 5/8 for that wall. Hit OK, OK. Now I'll come in and draw it across there. Hit escape to finish it. Now I've completed this assembly. I'm going to right click and hide the drawing so that I can copy all the elements from here. And again, they're just going to mirror straight across this grid line. And to get the drawing back, again, I'll hit the light bulb to bring it back. I can select it now, right click and say unhide in view, and then I can hit the light bulb again to get the purple to go away. So the hide in view is basically revealing elements, and then from the elements that are revealed you can select them and unhide them. That just allows you to sort of preview what's there. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at window type AM, which is right here, AM. It's, as you can see, 3 feet 4 inches wide, same width as the doors down below, but that's going to again include 2 inches of trim all the way around. We can find this window type here on page 13, I believe, the last page of the drawing set. And I'm looking for window type AM, and here you can see it. So the width of the window itself is 3 foot 4. The height of the window is going to be 4 foot nominal with 3/8 inch mortar around the outside of it. And I know that the width of the frame is 2 inches for both the frame itself and then the opening as it goes across. So what we need to do in order to start generating this is to pop back out to Revit. We're going to go to View and the User Interface and go to Recent Files. That brings us back out to the start here. We're going to make a new family, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to select Window RFT, which is a family type. Again, this is the kind of object that we can replicate throughout our model and adjust. And if we adjust it, then it will adjust all the different instances of that family throughout. So sort of a cross-reference type of file. So by default here we're looking at a view in plan, and the green lines here are something new to you probably. These are called reference lines. Basically these are the way that Revit knows how to place this object and what its boundaries are, and you can see by default there are two equal reference lines around the outside. These reference lines are going to want to go to the outside of whatever window you're working on. So the first thing that we want to do is look at the properties for these. So there are predefined properties that are going to be defined. You can see in particular here, one that's already showing up is width, which is 3 foot 0 inches. That width is something that we can adjust in the properties that are associated with this, and we can also make new properties. We'll talk about that further down the road. So here under family types, I can hit family types, and you can see that these dimensions are already defined. And so the first thing that we want to adjust is the width. Popping back out here, the width 3 foot 4, not including the mortar, and the height is 4 foot, not including the mortar. So back to Revit. Height's already defined correctly. The width we'll define as 3 feet 4 inches. It's going to adjust those two things out. Now the simplest thing to do is probably to look here in the exterior view. Now you can also see there's a default sill height. And the sill height for that wall will adjust later on. But by default, let's adjust that to also be 4 feet. So you can see that's down here under Other in the properties. So again, I should hit the properties is right up here next to the family type properties are up here right next to the regular properties that you would typically see. That's going to bring up this dialog where you can find the default sill height and say okay. And then the height of the window we already defined. So this is the outside reference to any geometry. Everything is going to need to basically kind of move in from this. And now what we're going to be doing is, in essence, making a series of conceptual masses, or masses, much in the same way we did last week. But these masses are going to be the geometry that you visualize when you bring a window frame in. So we're going to go to Create, and we're going to create an extrusion. And I'm just going to take the square profile and snap it to these outside reference lines. And you can see once I've drawn the rectangle that I get these lock buttons that are indicating that I can define a relationship to those reference lines, and I want to link that. So I'm going to lock all of those to those reference lines, and that's going to basically lock the perimeter of my window in to what I've got. The next thing I want to do is I'm offsetting to make the 2-inch thick window frame. So you can see by default when I hit the offset button, it's just offsetting one edge, and as I kind of move top to bottom across this, it's indicating whether it's going to go in or out. If I hit tab, I can get the entire rectangle that I drew, and I can get it to offset to the inside. So now I've got that 2-inch frame all the way around, and I can hit the check box up here. And again, this is just like a conceptual mass. I've just drawn two profiles that I'm going to extrude through the object. By default, when I've created this extrusion, over here you're going to see there's a set of constraints that are associated with it. In plan, if I pop back up into plan, that drawing that I drew is sitting right here on the center along this reference line. So this extrusion right now is set to be 1 foot thick, and here you can see it. And as I mouse around, it's going from the center of the wall out 1 foot. Right now what I can do is I can use these extrusion controls to snap it to the inside or the outside, and you can see what it's done here is changed it so that it's 3 inches and -3 inches for the start. So those are each going to be defined. I can either type them in the properties for this extrusion, or I can move them back and forth using these handles since there aren't any other constraints. There, it just snapped it off. So we know that we're going to be putting this wall into an 8-inch thick wall, or putting this window into an 8-inch thick wall type. So we probably want to adjust that just to make sure that we've got everything snapped correctly. So I'm going to select the wall that's here in this, and you can see by default it's just associated with the basic wall generic 6-inch. I can shift that to be an 8-inch wall type so that I'm getting the appropriate thicknesses. And this thing, we know the frame just wants to flush out with that 8-inch wall, so I'm going to pull that out to match on each side. And when I select that extrusion, I should see 4 and -4 for the sizes. The other thing that I can do here is associate a material with it. And I'm gonna, well, let's not deal with that right now. We'll just leave it as a white piece. So the next thing that I want to do now is to build the operable part of this. So this window frame pops out. It's like an awning type. I'm going to pop back out here. And we know that the frame around it is 2 inches, so we know the size of it. What we don't know is what the jamb looks like, what the depth of the frame is. And I can see there's a reference here to 4D 914 and 4D 911. So if I go back over here to the right, I can find those sill details. And I'm not too concerned with all of the specifications of this, but what I do want to know is the size of the actual operable piece. So here you can see my 8-inch wide piece. And then what I'm looking for is maybe here, 911. There's the jamb sill, lintel block. So what it looks like is I've got a 1-inch by 1-inch frame that's holding the glazing, and the glazing is going to be pushed towards the front of the jamb. I'm just trying to get the rough sort of geometry here. I don't need everything modeled perfectly for this. So I'm going to come back now to Revit, and I'm going to do another extrusion. So I want to go back out here to the exterior and hit create, extrusion. I'm going to select a rectangle again, and I can snap it to that outside. Again here, I know that these relationships are fixed, so I can go ahead and lock all of those and then hit offset again. Again, hit the tab. We know this thing is 2 inches, and I can hit the checkbox. Now this extrusion, we only want to be 1 inch. And again, it's going to be, and if I pop into 3D here, hopefully you can see it, we want it to be pushed out towards the front. No, excuse me, it's on center. The 1-inch extrusion is on center. So what I need to do is actually define it as a 1/2 inch in each direction. So back in Revit, rather than being 1 inch thick, we want it to be 0.5 inches that way and minus 0.5 inches this way. I've done that backwards. There we go. So that's going to be the operable piece to this window frame. And then the last piece is to put in a piece of glazing into this window frame. So once again, I'll come back out to the exterior view and do one more extrusion. This is for the glass. And I'm going to snap it to the inside of the frame. Hit the lock buttons to snap it, and no extrusion needed this time. I mean, no offset needed this time. The extrusion is simply going to be a 1/4 inch thick for the glazing. It's probably not that thick, but some of the fireproof stuff maybe. Then we can pop back out to 3D here, and I can see the glazing is now detailed in there as well. I can select that. Again, here by material, I could go ahead and start associating different materials with that. I'm not going to bother with it just yet. So you can swing around and get a sense of the detail for this window. At this point, what we want to do is save the window. I'm going to save it to the desktop, but you would want to keep these files in one location for a given project. I'm going to call this type AM and hit save. And then I need to load it into the project. So once I've saved it, this needs to actually be brought in as a family. And you can see by default right away when I hit load AM, since this is the only thing I have open, it's brought it in and it's ready to actually insert it. So I can drop it in right here, and then I can see that it looks like it's going to be 8 inches off of that center line. So I'll again use my technique of putting the measurement on from this grid line here to the edge of the window, and then select the window itself, hit modify to deselect, select the window, and then type in the dimension, which should be 8 inches. Okay, and I've got one more over here that looks as though it's probably symmetrical across this grid line, so I'm just going to hit the mirror and mirror it across on there. And that one looks to be symmetrical across this grid line, so I'll do the same thing again. Select the window, mirror across the grid line, and I'm good. Now I can also mirror those across to the other set of windows. So I'm going to just go along here, hold Control, select those 3 windows. Building is nice and symmetrical, and mirror it across into the other 2 crit rooms further down. Okay, so now to add one more level of complexity, we're going to go back and look at these window types that are in the offices and model those as well. So these are window types AH. They're going to follow some of the same method. So we'll go to the View tab, and we'll go back to the user interface and recent files, and again make a new family. So just reinforcing some of the things we did, we're going to open the window, family type. Everything's similar here. Now we need to go find window type AH. And here it is down here. You can see this one again has 2 parts to it, a fixed part and an operable part. The entire width of the window is 7 feet 8 inches. Again, all the trim is 2 inches all the way around. And the overall height without the mortar is 4 feet going up across. So really similar to the last one that we had. So 7 foot 8 is the width that we want to focus on, and the 4 foot height to start with. And then we're going to just do a series of extrusions. This time a bit more complexity to the extrusions that we'll kind of come back to. You can see the operable part is 3 feet wide sitting in there. So first things first, we'll go to the exterior view here and adjust some of the same things that we did. I'm going to select the wall, change it to an 8-inch wall type, so we're looking at this the correctly. We can go to the properties up here next to this piece and select it, define the overall sill height to be 4 feet and the overall width to be 7 feet 8 inches. Hit OK. You're going to see everything adjust to meet those new parameters that we've defined. So now my opening is the correct size. So the first thing here is to draw this extrusion, which goes all the way around. The 2-inch little gap here is going to be the difference. So we're going to also need to add that in. That's going to be 3 feet plus 2 inches. So 3 feet 2 inches to get to the right edge of it, and then another 2 inches to get to the left edge of it. So we can start just by creating a new extrusion again. Take the rectangle, lock all of those dimensions. We've got it at 7 foot 8, which is great. Do the offset again, 2 inches. I'm going to hit tab to select it all. Now, before we finish here, we need to come in and draw a couple of more lines. So again, the width of the wall coming this direction, or the width of the operable part of the window, is 3 feet. So I can draw that. And then coming off again 2 inches, where I could use the offset. And I also need to come in here and use the trim extend to trim out some of these lines. You can see by default that it's not very smart. It likes to just trim everything. We'll come back and draw these boundaries again. Just using the endpoint snap. And there we go. Now we can hit the checkbox. Oh, I missed a little bit there. Finish that closed loop. Again, we're going to come in here. We can either type in -4 inches for the start and +4 for the finish, or we could go to the 3D view and push and pull on those. But this is in essence what you want to see when you're looking at this window. And then now we need to go ahead and make that extrusion to for the operable piece of the window. So again, create extrusion. You can snap this to the outside. We'll go ahead and lock these. And offset them. Checkbox. And again, this should be a 1 inch thick piece, so I'm going to make that 0.5 inches and make the extrusion start -0.5. And the last one should be the piece of glass. So one more extrusion. Select it, put that there. That piece of glass, I can just hit the checkbox, should just be 1/4 inch for the end. And I also need to put a piece of glass in this fixed part of the opening. So one more extrusion. Lock all those dimensions. And make the thickness 1/4 inch. And hit the checkbox. And here's that final view. So now, just to make this transparent so that we're seeing it the way that it should, I'm just going to select the piece of glass, and here under material and finishes, I'm going to hit the ... We've got to add in a material, so I'm going to hit add parameter and call this glass. It's a type instance and it's a material and finish. So this is in line with the kinds of parameters that are already defined by reference planes in terms of dimensions. Materials are also a parameter, so these things both operate the same way in terms of defining a family type. We can hit OK, and then when we come back up here to the properties for the family itself, I can hit that, and you can see now there's a new glass category, and I can hit the ... in the value for this and select glass and say OK and OK. And I want to come in and select the other piece of glass and do the same thing. Once I've defined glass to be glass in the family type, then I only need to associate it with the other piece of glazing here. So I can hit save now for this window type, and this will be type AH, and hit save and load into project. Now you can see, since I've got a couple of files open, it's either going to load it into Storrs Office Walls or into type AM. Of course, we want to load it into Storrs Office Walls. I can hit OK. So now I can, follow this same method, sort of coming along and associating the wall, these windows with each of the office spaces. What you can see is that the AH is indicating sort of towards the center here where the operable part is. And so by default, we're going to want to look for that operable piece to be towards the center wall of any of the offices. So there I can put one in. Here you see, oh, excuse me, I can see it now down here, 3-4 and 4-4. It looks like the operable part actually goes the other way. So I'm going to pull that out and get it drawn in there correctly. By default, you can't really see it here unless you mouse over it. A couple of things that will help you with that is to come up here to the very top. You're going to want to use this thin lines button often. When I click that, it's going to kind of take away some of the thickness that's associated with the scale that's down here. The other thing I need to do is change the detail level from coarse to fine. So down here at the bottom, I could change the drawing scale and that would provide some more detail. But the key thing here is changing this to fine, changing the level of detail to fine. I'm guessing that my drawing is actually cutting through at a height of around the sill level. So if I select the floor plan and come down here to the view range and hit edit, it's correct. So it's actually cutting through right at 4 foot. If I change this to 5 foot and hit OK, thought it would start showing. Let's look at that again. I think the 7'6" is aligning with the window. Trying to get it to cut through the glazing. I'll figure that out. When you select it, you can see it here, which way the kind of smaller opening is. And then here you can find the dimension. I think our most useful one will be here, that they're 1 foot 4 inches apart at the center. So it would be that's 16 inches. Again, everything on that 8-inch module. So what I can do is put in a measurement from the center line of the wall to the outside of my new window piece, bring it out, select the window AH and change this to be 8 inches from the center. And now we can go along and select each of the windows and mirror them across. The other thing to do is to select a pair of them. Going to hold Control down, and I could copy them from grid to grid. And then this last one needs to be a mirror again. And then once again, I can hold Control down, select them all, and mirror them across on the big grid line onto the other set of offices. Let's take a look at that in 3D. There you go. We're starting to see offices sort of taking shape. Some of the windows here, these AM windows, we actually want to edit because we never defined the glazing for them. So I'm going to go back to them just to show you how to do this, and select AM, hit Edit Family. Going to throw me back into the family view here. I can go into the 3D view, and I'm going to try and select that glazing piece and do the same thing I did with the material property here. Hit Add a Parameter, call it Glass, say OK, and then edit that parameter up here under the family type and define it as the material class. Okay and okay. Again, hit save and hit load into project. Hit OK. This is what's important here is that we've rewritten that family, and we want to overwrite the existing version and its parameter values, and that'll give it the association that we just defined. Key thing here is when you hit the shaded view that you see that everything is actually glazed. Okay, so again, get wall type 6A made for these two double thick walls here. Get window type AM and window type AH, each built accurately and modeled accurately associated with the grid lines in your model. Again, everything needs to be super precise. That's what you're being evaluated on. Make sure you're snapping everything to the grid lines. I'll see you soon.